What if the darkest parts of human nature weren't discovered in wars or crimes, but inside laboratories? Places designed for knowledge became the stage for some of the most disturbing experiments in human history. And the most unsettling part? The subjects were ordinary people, just like you. Psychology was meant to understand the human mind, to explain behavior, to improve lives. But in its early years, the line between curiosity and cruelty was often ignored. Because to understand the mind, some researchers believed you had to break it. How far would a person go if instructed by authority? How easily can morality be overridden? How fragile is empathy when placed under pressure? These questions didn't stay theoretical. They were tested in real people with real consequences. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram designed an experiment that would become one of the most controversial in history. His goal was simple: to understand obedience. But what he discovered was far more disturbing. Participants were told they were part of a learning experiment. They were assigned the role of teacher. Their task: to administer electric shocks to a learner every time a mistake was made. What they didn't know was that the shocks weren't real, but the screams were. As the experiment progressed, the voltage increased. The learner screamed, begged, pleaded, then fell silent. And yet, when instructed by the authority figure, most participants continued, up to lethal levels. Not because they were cruel, but because they were told to. The experiment revealed something terrifying. Ordinary people are capable of harming others when guided by authority, not out of hatred, but obedience. And once responsibility is shifted, morality becomes flexible. Just a decade later, another experiment would push the limits even further. This time, not testing obedience, but power. In 1971, Philip Zimbardo created a simulated prison. Volunteers were randomly assigned roles, guards or prisoners. There were no real crimes, no real authority, just roles and expectations. Within days, something changed. Guards became aggressive, dominant, cruel. Prisoners became submissive, anxious, broken. The environment had rewritten their behavior. The experiment was meant to last 2 weeks. It was shut down after 6 days because it spiraled out of control. What started as a simulation became psychologically real. The Stanford Prison Experiment revealed power doesn't just corrupt, it transforms. And under the right conditions, people don't just play roles, they become them. But some experiments didn't involve power. They targeted something more vulnerable: fear. In 1920, a baby known as Little Albert was used in a conditioning experiment. At first, he showed no fear toward a white rat. Then, scientists paired the rat with a loud, terrifying noise. Eventually, Albert began to cry at the sight of the rat alone. Then, the fear spread to rabbits, to fur, to anything similar. Fear had been artificially created. The experiment proved that fear can be learned, but it also left a question unanswered. Was the fear ever removed? No one knows. Years later, another experiment revealed something even darker. Not fear, but hopelessness. Subjects were exposed to situations where escape was impossible. Eventually, they stopped trying. Even when escape became available, they didn't move. They had learned that effort was useless. This concept applies to humans. When people experience repeated failure or lack of control, they begin to accept it. Not because they can't change their situation, but because they believe they can't. Another disturbing force is conformity. In experiments by Solomon Asch, participants gave clearly wrong answers just to match the group. Even when reality was obvious, they chose agreement over truth. These experiments reveal something uncomfortable. Your thoughts, your decisions, your sense of right and wrong are not as independent as you think. They can be influenced, shaped, controlled. Across all these experiments, a pattern emerges: authority, environment, fear, social pressure. each one capable of overriding individuality. The most disturbing part is not what these experiments show about others, it's what they reveal about you. Because under the right conditions, you might act the same way. So the next time you believe you would act differently, in a moment of pressure, ask yourself this: are your choices truly yours, or are they shaped by forces you don't even see? Welcome to Dark Science.